Welcome to the Data Analysis Portfolio Project, which is an end-to-end project where we're going to be looking at using the data that we have on employees to reward a healthy employee lifestyle. In this analysis project, we're going to build a database, we're going to develop SQL query, we're going to perform an analysis, we're going to connect our database to a data visualization tool such as Power BI, and then we're going to create a dashboard based on an approved wireframe from our HR department. So here's a request we got from HR that went to our data analysis team. They want us to provide a list of healthy individuals with low absenteeism for our healthy bonus program. So this is going to be a bonus of $1,000 that we reward these employees with. Then they want us to calculate a wage increase or an annual compensation for non-smokers for an insurance budget of $983,000, $221 for all non-smokers. Then we are going to create a dashboard for HR to understand absenteeism at work based on an improved wireframe. Okay, so let's get started. Let's dive into the SQL Server Studio. Okay, here we are in Microsoft SQL Server Studio. What we're going to do is initiate the program and build a database. So I'm going to connect, because this is on my local machine. I'm using my Windows login as my credentials. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a database. So if you look at the left-hand side, and if you need help installing this application, please check out the first video in the description below. But right now, we're going to continue on and create a database. So on the far left corner, you can see there is a tree here that says database. I'm going to open that up. And you can see I have several databases that I created before. We are going to create a new database for our purposes. I am going to right click, and then you can see we are presented with the option New Database. Click New Database. I'm going to name my database Work, which kind of reflects our data set. I'm going to go to OK. And now you can see your database has been created. Now, in our database, we need to add tables. But right now, we don't have any tables. What we're going to do is import the data that we want as tables before we develop our SQL query. So now that we've created our database, we can go over and right-click it. It's called Work. We navigate down to Task. Then we go to Import Flat File. Because our data is in a flat CSV format, we're going to do Insert, and we're going to be presented with this window, and it gives us kind of an introduction of how the flat file is going to be imported. I'm going to click Next. We provide it with a path. You can browse to find out where that is. I have mine here. And now I'm going to import the first table. So now I'm going to click Next, but you can see that the file path is indicated. The table name, which you can change if you like. I'm just going to leave it like that. And then it gives you the schema name. So I'm going to hit Next. And then you get a preview of the data. And you can see the columns there. We have it clicked yes on use rich data type detection, which will indicate what type of data is in that particular column. I'm going to hit Next. And you can see we have all our data here. I'm not going to indicate a primary key or whether we will allow nulls because I know my data doesn't have any. I'm going to click Next. And we can see that it's going to import it into the server that you have, and that is indicated here, and that is on your local machine. I'm going to click Finish. You can see data has been inserted. I'm going to hit close. Now, if we want to see that updated table there, we click refresh. We can decompress tables. And now you can see that table there. If I right click and say select the top 1,000 rows, it will create a window and you can see the script here with all of the columns, and it's getting our data out of the table. Now we need one more table for our database to be complete. So I am going to just quickly add the other table. Same way we did before, task, import our flat file, go to next, location of the file. It's going to be called reasons. You have access to this. And it looks like we have an issue there because it's being used by another application. So I can close that application. Now that I close the application, I should be able to hit next. You can see we can see the data here. Now I'm going to click next again. Next, finish. And now we have our two tables in our database. So from our first table, we can see all the columns. We can see there's a reason for absence, month of absence, day of week, seasons, transportation expenses, distance from work, service time, age, workload, hit, target, disciplinary failure, education. We have this column variable, which means number of children, SON, social drinker, social smoker, pet, height, body mass index, and absenteeism and hours. And if we look at the data that we pulled in from the table here, you can see a lot of it's numerical. And we have our reasons for absence, which is indicated by a number. However, we want to be able to add the definition from the dictionary, which was in the other table that we brought in. So we can go back over to the right side here and we can click into this. And if I highlight reasons, which is the dictionary table, I can also see it in a different way. Instead of querying it, I can just click and to open that folder tree and then go to columns, and you can see all there is the number, which is associated with this reasons here, and then the character. You can even see the data types and whether we have null values here. So our first order of business is connecting those two tables with a join. And we need to bring in our final table, which is going to give us the employee salary. And this is usually how a lot of HR databases are set up, where you will have the salary and some of the other specifics in different tables. And we could do the same. We know we have our work database. We're going to go through the same actions. So I'm just going to do that quickly by going to task and importing that flat file, going to the location, getting compensation, bringing that in, and you can see it's indicated here. We have an extra column there that we don't need, which is an index, but we will ignore that for now. And we'll just bring this in, finish. That's all good to go. We can see the tables here, but we need to Control Shift and R, or either hit the reset here to see the full tables to make sure that was imported. And we can see the three tables now, and we can begin to start our SQL analysis. So now that we have all the tables, let's develop our SQL code. What I'm going to do is make sure that this database is highlighted, and I'm going to right click and click new query. You'll be presented with a blank query, and now what we want to do is develop our joins first to get the full table. So I am going to create a document string with double double. So create a join table. And what we can do is start creating those joins. So we know that our main table is that absentee at work table. So we want to be able to select, for right now, we're going to select everything, but we're going to have to modify this later from absenteeism at work. And now, because you highlighted that database, you should just be able to click that table and bring it in. And then if I just run this, you can see that table has been created. Now that is the table that's going to serve as our main table. And now we want to start joining the different tables to it. So the first table we will join is our compensation table. And we're going to do that with a left join. And we have an ID column here with our absentee data at work that indicates the ID of our employee. And we're going to connect that ID column to the ID column in our salary or compensation table. So first thing you want to do after you have that main select statement, you want to join. Now, you don't always need to specify the type of join, but we should. We want a left join where we bring back all of the tables from the table on the left, which represents the main table, which is absenteeism at work. And what table do we want to join? That compensation table. And you can see that IntelliSense give you the table since we have indicated the database that we're using. Now, how do we want them joined? We want them joined on each one of these tables. Now, the easy way to do this is just call this table A and call this table B to represent an alias. And the reason we do that because we need to specify which column has which table has which column. So we want the ID from the first table here, and that's going to equal B column here, that ID. And if we run this, we have a syntax error. Left join. Oh, forgot one keyword, on. So now we can run that. And now you see we get the table back. And we should have a new column here, which is a compensation by hour. And then you could see this column represented here, which is also the ID and the ID here. ID in the first column. Now we'll deal with that later, but I wanted to show you the first initial join. So the next join we want to be able to do is join our reasons table so we can have the reasons for the absence. So we know that this is the ID column here in our A table that we aliased. So all we want to do is use that left join again. And what we want to do is left join which table? We want that reasons table. There it is. And this time we don't have the same column name. So in the A table we have reasons underscore for absence, which is our main table. And then we want to make that equal, and we got to make sure it on. We want to make that equal our reasons table, which we're going to alias as R, and then we're going to call that R dot, and then we can see the number column in there as our table. I might have, let me make sure this is right, reasons for absence. So there we go. And we see that everything is in no squiggly red line. So that should give us our table. So I'm just going to highlight that. And yes, it did. And then we can see the reasons for the absence there. So you might be asking why I'm not using this semicolon after to execute things. You are correct. This is usually put at the end of a query. However, I am just running this in our SQL Server Studio just to get the right table that we're looking for. But it is kind of customary in most database management systems to end your query with this semicolon. Now we are bringing in a wildcard select statement, which is not necessarily good because we're going to be bringing in all of these columns, which could cause issues. So when we bring this into our dashboard as a query, what we're going to do is optimize this query to only bring back the columns that we need. So let's deal with our first question, which would be to bring back a list of the 100 or so healthiest individuals that we can give that $1,000 uh, budget to, which would probably equate to about, $10 for each one of them. Now, we're probably not going to bring back exactly 100, but we can create some criteria for our HR department to make a decision. So let's use a document string and let's say find the healthiest. Now, we know we already have our column here. Now, we haven't been given any real criteria based on what is healthy, so we're going to define this on our own and then pass back the list to HR for some feedback for them to define for us. So we are just bringing back that whole table, and now what we can do is we can start filtering through that table. So you can see on the right side here, we have smokers and drinkers. So we're going to make the assumption that they don't smoke and they don't drink, and that is a criteria for someone living a healthy lifestyle. So we want to bring back everything where, and then we want the social drinker column to equal 0, because this means that 0 and 1 is an indication in this column if we find it in the table here, whether someone is a smoker or drinker. And we want that social smoker flag to also be 0. And let's continue on with this. So we can also think about BMI and say anything under 25 as a BMI, which is what I Googled as a healthy BMI, but this may change. So let's just say BMI and body mass index is less than 25. So we're further filtering that table with this where statement. Now, we can also see here that we probably want to get the average also of the absenteeism, and also say, okay, we want people who have few absences, or absences that are lower than the average. So we can create another statement. Now here we don't have our average, and we can't just simply use an average function. So I am going to use a subquery here in my where statement by just copying this and putting it in encapsulating it in a parentheses, and then changing this to the average. So AVG, you can see that function pop up. And then I want absenteeism in hours. What is it? Absenteeism underscore time underscore in underscore hours. So I want the average, and I want the absenteeism here, where we have the absenteeism for each employee is going to be less than the average. And I want to break this up a little bit because it's quite long. And maybe so we want to say absenteeism is less than the total average of all the absenteeism. Now you probably could do this with a window function, but this subquery will do. And what I'm going to do is highlight this. I think those are all the criteria we will use, and see how big that list is. And we can see we brought back 111 rows. So we could give them this whole table, or we could optimize the query to specify which columns we want. But using those where statements, we can simply give them this list to answer their questions of find the healthiest employees for the bonus, which is $10. Okay, let's calculate our increase for non-smokers. So this is going to be our compensation rate increase for non-smokers. And we just created that docu-string. Now what we need to do here is we are going to only need the count of smokers. So I'm going to do the count here, and I'm going to count all the rows in the data set. However, we are going to add a where filter. So where social smoker equals 0. And if we run this, we will get an amount. We get 686 employees. And we can also alias that column to non-smokers and run that again. And we get our 686. Now what I want to do is calculate the increase that they're going to get. So I just have a calculator here. We know that our amount from HR was $983,221. So we will use that in our calculation. But first, let's take the hours. So I'm just going to say the budget we have is 983,221. So I don't forget. And now that we have our calculator, let me clear this. We know that we have 686 employees, and we want to get the total amount of hours that they are working. So first I want to just get the amount of hours per year. So we know 5 days a week times 8 hours times 52 weeks in a year is the amount of hours that 686 employees are working. So we just have to multiply by the number of employees, which is 686. And then we get our number here is 1.4 million and some change. I'm just going to copy that. Now that we have this amount, we can get our increase here by just clearing and writing in 983,000. Oops, let's go back. 983,221, and then divided by the calculation we just came up with, the 1.4, and you can see that is 68-cent increase per hour. So a 0.68 increase per hour. Now that may not sound like a lot. However, if we want to see what that yearly amount is, we can just work backwards, right? So that we know that we are working 5 days a week and times that 8 hours a day times that 52, which is 52 weeks in a year, times our 68. And we are being able to give each employee $1,414.40 per year. So that is nothing to cough at. It's a good amount of money that we would provide our employee per year if they were a non-smoker. So I'll just write that in per year. So let's continue to optimize the query that we need to bring into our dashboard. So we're going to take this join table and we are going to now optimize this query. Now, why do we need to optimize this query? Let's just run it again. One, we are using a wildcard, which is not recommended. We should indicate the columns that we want. Additionally, this column has two identical columns, which we won't be able to bring in to our data set in Power BI. So to avoid having that duplicate column and bringing in all that information, we can just copy and paste our query here. And then instead of bringing the wildcard in, we indicate what columns we want to bring in. And the first thing we want to do is bring in just one ID column. So we're going to use that alias that we used here for our absentee at work column, and we want to bring in the ID. Next, I want to bring in the reason column here, which is a part of our R alias table in the reasons table. So I'm just going to say R, and then you can see that reason comes up. And if I run that, we can see those two columns come in. Now, one thing that we want to do also is change some of the columns that we have here. So I am going to use a case statement because if I run the whole query again and just show you, we also want to be able to maybe make some categories with BMI here and make some categories with the seasons so that we can pass these on to Power BI as categories. Now we could do this in Power BI, but I do want to show you how to do this in the SQL. So let's start off creating a seasons column using a case statement. So what we're going to do, we're going to start out with case, and we're going to say case when, and you don't have to make it capitalized. So we want to do the month. Let's do it here. The month underscore of absence is in, let's say is in, where we use this command, and let's say 12, 1, and 2. And then we're going to call this winter with single quotations. Then we want to do when again, when, and I'm just going to copy this so I can save some time. And I'm going to copy this 2 more times just to make it easy. And then we also want to put an else statement here, and we'll say else is unknown. And then we will end this statement. Okay, so let's go with this for 3, 4, 5. And then we will, 3, 4, 5. And let's call this spring. 6, 7, and 8. We'll call this summer. And then lastly, we will do 9, 10, 11. We will call this fall. And we also need to name this column. So let's call it seasons, seasons name. So as season names. And then we need to put a comma here. And now if we run this, we will run this, and then you can see we have those seasons. So also let's start building this query out. So we already see we have the month of absence that we should be bringing in here. So we want to bring in all the columns that we need. Now I want to make another case statement with the body mass index, I believe. And let me open up this column here so I can just see the names. Body mass index, yes, body mass index. That looks correct. And so let's just run our query here. And you can see we have the body mass index there. Now I want to create another case statement where that is. So I'll just put that here. Case when. And we want to say body mass index, which we have here. And we will do a different type of operator instead of in. We will say is less than 18.5. And I just Googled this to understand. So we will say if your body mass index is less than 18.5, you are underweight. And we want to say when your, let's just start, and we don't need the comma. Let's start copying this a few times. 1, 2, oh, let's get all of it. And we will have to use some and operators. And let's do one more, I think. And then we want to say else unknown. And then end as BMI category. Let's say BMI category. And oops, okay, now we need to add some operators here. So if it's between, so we're not doing greater, so we will say between 18.5 and 24.9, and we will say this is healthy. And if it's greater than or between 24.9 or 25 and 29, let's say 0.9. I don't even think we have, so we don't even need that. We'll say between 30. And then we better put 25 here because we don't have any decimals, I believe. So let's go with this. We will say this is healthy weight, and 25 and 30 we're going to say is overweight. And we're going to say greater than 30. We're going to call this obese. And so now we have these two case statements. It looks like it's working. We don't see any errors indicated. And there we go. we have our categories. Now all we need to do is start to build out the columns that we want to bring in. So you would just go through this section here, and I would bring those in. So for example, I would bring in, just go here and start bringing in those columns. Just put a comma under season name. And then what we're going to bring in is month of absence. And you can see that IntelliSense capture that. And for example, day of week, and it captures that. So I won't bore you with these. I will just continue as I am now to bring these in and then speed this up so we have our final query. So let's just look at my final query. You can just see I added these columns in with my case statement and brought all of this in, and we can see this here. Now you may want to go back and create some categories with age and social smoker, where you could do a case statement for that. However, I can do a lot of the easier stuff in Power BI and let this do the heavy lifting. And I believe for the age column here, it might be better to do this with one of the case statements like this. However, I don't think I'm going to be showing that off in the dashboard, so I will continue with this. So we're going to use this query to bring this table into Power BI in the optimized way. So here we are in Power BI where we're going to build our dashboard, and what we need to do is navigate over to the Get Data tab, go to More, and then you can start typing in SQL. And then what you'll be presented with, if you click SQL Server Databases, is this screen here. Now we need to know our server name and our database, and if you have forgotten, let me show you. You can see that here in the top corner, which says here's your server name, desktop-n6 9HGF, and then .work would be your database name, and we know that we created the database called work. So I will be able to enter this information in to be able to connect to the database. So I'm going to flip back over to Power BI, and then I'm going to put the server name. Okay, now we have that in, and then we can just type in the database name. And then now that we have advanced here, we can enter our SQL query. So I'm going to go back over and get the SQL query for our optimized query. I'm going to select all of this, and hopefully we brought in the columns that we wanted. If you didn't, you can always just go and change this query later. I'm going to drop this in, and there's my query. And then we go to OK. And you can see it brought back the table that we were looking for. So let's load it. And you can see it has all of our information there with our case statement columns. So we are ready to roll. Now we loaded that in. It's called query. We could always just change the name of that. I don't really care. I'll leave it as that. So we can now start to bring in our categories and start to develop our dashboard. So here I could bring in this with absenteeism from work, and we know we can turn that into a pie chart. So now we can start building our dashboard, but we want to make sure that we follow the agreed upon wireframe. So let's take a look at the wireframe before we start building out. So here we are in our wireframe that we have passed over to HR, which they signed off on, and it's always good to send a wireframe just because it's always a lot of back and forth when you have a dashboard. So here is what they kind of agreed upon, and a wireframe doesn't reflect necessarily the final design. It's just an indication of where things will be laid out in a dashboard. So you can see we need a main KPI, which I'm assuming is going to be average absenteeism, and then our narrative, which we're going to generate with the Power BI. Smart narrative, we get our secondary KPIs, which we can decide which one of those are the best. Sometimes you can have a KPI workshop to understand that. Then we have our distributions that are important, like BMI and other things that we may want to break that absenteeism down by smoker and non-smoker, and whatever else we can come up with. Then we want to have some kind of trended breakdown. Maybe that's monthly, maybe that's seasonal. I think it's probably better to have it, by monthly and seasonal. And maybe what we can do is try to put a filter here so we can filter this by season. And then a table breakdown, I'm assuming, so they can see the IDs and some other information about the absenteeism and the actual user, that would be the employee. And then scatter plot, which they could look at different variables. Now, I probably would just use one variable, but we could use maybe like a switch statement so they can look at multiple variables. Okay, so let's get started with building. So I am just going to open this up, and then you can see we can start building everything out. Now I won't build it all out step by step because I think you will benefit by seeing the final version. So, but I wanted to show you how we can, come up with a wireframe and be able to produce something that is quite interesting and nice for your user. So you can see how I can start building that wireframe out and kind of making sure that things look the same. Now we definitely will have to adjust the size, and you can do this by going to this section, going to the paintbrush on the right side, doing the canvas settings, and then you can go to custom. And what you can do is start playing with the height and the width to give you what you want. You can see it's a little bit easier to deal with if you do that also, because you can see the canvas very far out. So I'm just going to start putting these here and then start changing the actual dimensions and labels. So I'm going to turn all of these labels off. Now if you click on this, what you can do is, if they're the same visual, you can change things quite easily. So you can see I can just take off the legends very easily, and then I can go to detail labels and tell them to put all labels so that we have the names of everything. So you could, what I'm going to do is also what we can do, which is quite interesting. If you click on all of these, you don't need to click on each one individually. You can just hold the mouse pointed down and make sure you capture all of them. Once you do that, you can click on the paintbrush, and we can go to properties, and we can even change the size. So you can see how all of these are different widths. I'm going to say change all those to 269. And you can see now I can kind of fit them in easier and kind of go there. Now these are all of the same category, but we can go off and change those categories just by replacing things here. Social smoker. And I think what we probably let's see, and you can see what else is really cool. Let's see for smoker here. Let me go and zoom in. Page view, actual size. If I go to smoker here, you can see what is actually going on is they have true and false. That's because the data type has come in as a Boolean or true and false number. So it helps us out a lot. Now you got to decide if you don't want to, what this is bringing is the sum of absenteeism. I don't think this is what they're looking for. They're looking for the distribution of your users. So instead of bringing in absenteeism, I would actually bring in the category and count it so you can see how many workers, because each line represents a worker. Same with smokers. So if I bring in smokers here, put it in the values, social smoker, and get the count, this is going to represent that 7% that is actual smoker. And that'll give them an indication also how they should actually distribute those funds that we've done that analysis on. I'm going to take off all the categories here, take off the titles. Where is it? General. I don't like the titles. I'll add them later. So I'll just leave this for now because I'm going to continue to build my dashboard. And remember, they wanted to use the smart narrative. So if you have the updated Power BI, you should be able to bring in the smart narrative. And here it is. So if you bring that in, you can see it comes up with a smart narrative. I want to make it a little bigger. And so I can see the text. Maybe that's too big. Let's go with 16. And this is a smart narrative. Now, when you're using this, it's going to change depending on what you bring into it. You could also bring some specific values into it to make it deliver the message that you want. But the beautiful thing about this, if we keep the dashboard where it's highly interactive, we can affect the smart narrative also. You can see it gets filtered. So depending on what we bring in, this may change. So we need to think about that. So what I'm going to do instead of building this out, which may take a while, I'll show you the final version and show you everything that I've done in it. All right, so I just wanted to show you a quick kind of work in progress dashboard that you could present to your HR at this point. Mine has a bit of styling with backgrounds, shadows, and color schemes and everything else. And you can see it's indicated as a work in progress. Let me zoom out very quickly for you with fit to page so you can see the whole thing. And you can see it does follow that wireframe quite well. And we can definitely filter it by seasons. And you can see the whole dashboard change, and which would help the staff to understand which season produces the total average or the average amount of absenteeism. I'm going to go back in to fit the width, and let's just walk through the dashboard. We have our main KPI next to a icon. Now you can go to flaticon.com and download a lot of icons, and you can also go to like online PNG tools to change the color of those icons, and I'll put those links in the description below for you. But we have our main KPI, and you can see I just put some headings and the main KPI, which is the average of absenteeism in hours. We have this Power BI Smart Narrative. We can optimize this where it works better, where it's not like so kind of itemized that way, but it will also filter according to the selections here. And you don't have to limit your dashboard to the way I did it. Please be creative and let me see some of the things that you've created, post them, and we can all comment and enjoy. I added a shadow in the back with this background kind of shape just to give it a sectioned off approach. And I did the same here. I added two KPIs. I added the number of employees, which is a count of IDs, and the total hours, which is a sum of those absentee hours. Then I broke up those categories into education, pets, children, and BMI. And then the cool thing is we can click into any of these and this will filter the dashboard also, which gives a pretty good effect. Now you won't see these shape changes if you post this to an online Power BI service, which makes it cool because you won't be able to see these boxes pop up. And we probably do a little bit better job in spacing, but you can see how cool that is. Also, we have a trend line here, and all I did was put the trend of the absentee hours by month, and I kept the month as just a number, and I kept the day of the week as a number. You might want to go in and optimize those and change those over to something that is a little bit more visible, such as a name of the day of the week. Then all I did was create a really small table and then took the count of all of the absences here so you can see which absence is populated the most. We can definitely click into this and it will also filter the dashboard. Now that's not the best way. We might want to add these filters up here just in case, but we will present this to HR and let them decide. And finally, what I did is I put a transportation expense and the average work absenteeism, average workload by day, transportation. And this just shows that the transportation expense and the workload. Now you can definitely just put any other metric here for your comparison, but I just put those two as a correlation comparison. We probably want to give these a little bit better titles. And what you could do here is create a switch and add any other title to the back. In the background here is just I found a dark purple background and put them in the back. And this just kind of creates kind of a nice dashboard layout for us that we can use to present to our HR and say, hey, this is the final thing that we have. Well, can you give us feedback? And you can even export it out as a PDF and give it to them. But it's good to get their feedback on whether it is something that they want. And we can then get their idea if they want to compare multiple multiple variables in the scatter plot here. So we can create what we call a switch where they can switch different metrics there. But I left that as a placeholder. So I hope this was a good project to get you started. Please definitely leave your dashboards or any questions in the comment section below. Anything you need, let me know. But this is a good project for you to get started that takes you on the end-to-end data analysis journey. Thank you.